there's some sort of veil being lifted on our monetary system, where compared to right now, our monetary system is managed by either the Federal Reserve or the central bank, the United States government, which is essentially the standard of the world. Is it because are people interested in this because this is democratizing the money and sharing it like both transparently and theoretically, eventually equally around the world? Is that the driver here, or is it really like the other piece, like anti-establishment, the world is ending, the dollar is going to fail, middle finger to the world, buy Bitcoin to the moon?
I think it's a combination of those things, and for everyone who enters, it's a little bit different. But I do think that this is a populist movement in some ways, but it's a healthy form of populism because it's not saying we're going to burn down the old system. It's saying we're going to opt out. And we're going to build this new awesome system, and this new system, this new money system, this new financial system is going to be based on credibly neutral protocols, right? So if you think about the monetary policy of the U.S. And when individuals think about that, well, what is that controlled by? It's controlled by Jerome Powell and a small group of individuals, right? And they're trying their best, I'm sure, right? But do they always get it right? No, they don't always get it right. And do they have undue control? And have they, over the past, 10 to 20 years, printed money more in favor of like the establishment and the banking system? This is back to the Cantillon effect that we were talking about earlier, where this money printing is not going to average citizens in the US. It's going to bankers and people who hold assets. That's why if you want to play the monetary game in the United States, you can't just hold dollars in a savings account anymore, right? Like you're not making any money that way. You have to play the game. You have to buy assets. You have to invest. And so people are saying, well, should a small group of individuals in Washington be able to turn the dials on the money system? What happens if they become corrupt? And so this is a ground up movement to say, no, we want to build our money system. And by the way, not just central banking, but also commercial banking on credibly neutral protocols where, that can't be biased, that can't be corrupted. And so this is kind of a reaction to some of the wealth inequality that we've seen. This is a reaction to censorship. This is a reaction to, hedge fund managers calling the owners of Robinhood and saying, stop trading GameStop, right? It's a reaction to all of these things. And this is crypto's moment. This is crypto's decade. I think this is why this is an important movement for us.
Let me ask though, because I totally understand the dynamic of like, the kind of establishment has been rigging the system and making the rules and setting the rules for far too long, and therefore sort of the only people who have been benefiting from the rules. But there is a movement really on the left in the United States, this like almost modern monetary theory camp that says, look, if we can kind of print money limitlessly, right, we could in theory print money and give it directly to people, right? And like print money for a UBI or something like that. What concerns me about when we look at the future of Bitcoin and these sort of limited currencies is sort of what the issue was maybe with the gold standard, which is there is a finite amount of it. And are we going to end up in a world where once again you have a finite resource and it's all pooling to elites and there's no more that can be created? How do you respond to that? Or what are people thinking about that?
So I think that is a really insightful comment, Carly. Like I think you hit the nail on the head. And there are different camps and communities inside of cryptocurrency. So there's this strong Austrian, economic bent that would hate everything that you just said about modern monetary theory.
Right? I may be in that camp for what it's worth. I don't know.
Well, so there's that camp, and they say like, no, government shouldn't print money, right? We should have a credibly neutral standard, something like a gold standard, right? And that should come from cryptocurrency. But to your point, well, what's the response when you say, well, that's just going to lead to an unequal system in the future where people who bought in Bitcoin early or whatever, crypto early, like they end up being the elites and the new bankers, right? So that's one group in crypto. But there's another group in crypto, because it's a very, wide camp that thinks that, well, we have been printing money, and essentially we've been giving out UBI. We've been giving out UBI for the last 20 years, but we've been giving it to the wealthy, right? So maybe what we need is a UBI system for everyone else, the citizens, right? This is kind of Andrew Yang's platform, and well, with cryptocurrency, with systems like Ethereum, this makes a great path for distributing that money, right? So like I don't know, but getting a check from the IRS or whoever issued it that for COVID, stimulus, basically that was a very long process. What if you could just hit a button and a digital currency from issued by the central banks in the US just appeared in your wallet, right? So like this is the type of innovation we could tap into, and there's a whole side of the crypto community that's like, hey, we don't think that bottom up money like a Bitcoin or an Ether should be outlawed, right? We think that people should have that option, but we also think that central banks should play a role in this, and they should promote better distribution of their money through things like UBI, and cryptocurrency can be can be sort of a conduit and a network to make that more efficient. So you'll find both sides of the camp represented in the crypto community, I think.
I believe it's Bitcoin in particular. They have done some work on regulation. They have been working with governments to prevent the money laundering piece of this, because the dark side of cryptocurrency is that if it's completely anonymous, really, like, you can't follow the money anymore, and you end up in some really, really, really dark places. So talk to me a bit about where we are today on, let's call it the regulation of this, or not even regulation, like how governments have been working with the cryptocurrency community.
Or not working with them.
Or not working, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
are afraid of them.
So the crypto community, the internet community has always talked about government as kind of the final boss, right? It's like you pop its head up and shut it down.
I love the internet
right?
so
like,
much.
So that's been an ongoing meme, and I would just say that's been an ongoing meme since kind of the birth of Bitcoin. But what I would say is the regulatory regime in the U.S. and in most countries around the world has actually been surprisingly friendly to crypto, which is great. So the bank charters can now custody crypto assets in the U.S. The CFTC, the Commodities Future Exchange, has just said that Bitcoin is a commodity, so it can be regulated that way, and so is Ether, a commodity. There's been no move to really outlaw cryptocurrencies. And I think part of the reason for this, and by the way, on the comment about sort of anonymous cash and the hazards of that. Well, I mean, the biggest anonymous cash and money laundering actually happens with like dollars, right? It's actually if you want to launder money,
cash is easier. Yeah,
it's
right.
way easier. Like there's fiat on ramps to crypto. It's open, but it's not completely private in Bitcoin or in Ethereum. So if you want to launder money, like, don't do this, guys. But like, cash is the way to do it. Benjamins. That's where briefcases full of Benjamins.
I've seen Breaking Bad. I know you're talking. I'm just.
You know what?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's actually not a good tool for laundering money. And I think what's happening is governments are realizing that there are far more wins than losses with the adoption of crypto. There's going to be a whole new kind of, where's the crypto Silicon Valley going to be located? Is that going to be in the jurisdiction of the US, or is it going to be another country? Are we going to, like, what about distribution of central bank digital currencies? Well, those should happen on public networks like Ethereum. So there are all of these efficiency wins that governments have, similar to the early internet. Like the early internet, it's a little bit scary to say, we've got this communication protocol. Anyone in the world can spin up a website and start projecting whatever ideas they have. That's a little bit scary for governments, right? But the wins in adopting that protocol, the protocol of the internet, far outweighed the losses. And so everybody did it. And I think that's what's happening with governments around the world is they're all adopting this technology for the wins.
I'm so excited to watch prime ministers and global leaders talk about Dogecoin or whatever dreams we whip up. It's going to be exciting. And I believe if you do not understand this, you're unfit to lead, because this same community just wiped out Wall Street for about a week. Like, this is real. And it's frustrating to watch leaders pretend they don't understand it or think it's like a weird internet culture thing.
On the other hand, is there a certain advantage? Again, I worry about these kinds of technologies ultimately being co-opted by sort of these elite institutions and undermining the very sort of advantages they provide, which is this like democratization effect, right? And so is there a certain advantage that, call it the internet right now, has in that a lot of leaders don't necessarily fully understand this. And it kind of gives us an opportunity to make sure it sort of is implemented democratically, before sort of these, call them elite institutions or establishment institutions, are able to really kind of co-opt them and manipulate them to their own gains.
Totally. I think the birth story, like we talked about cryptos, it almost had an immaculate conception because all along the establishment has shunned it. Right? It's just like, oh, it's too volatile to be a money, right? Like the boom and bust cycles. Like, of course, every time they said this is like a tulips kind of like fad, and it's all going to fade out. Every single cycle they said this, and so what's happened is people have been the first to adopt it. Developers, internet natives have been the first to adopt it. I think it would be far less interesting if in like year one of Bitcoin, the U.S. government just bought all the Bitcoin, right? And that's not going to distribute cryptocurrency to the people. The other thing I'll say to you is like one concern I have being in cryptocurrency is back to exactly what you said, Carly, which is like we have to make sure that we're not just creating a new crypto system with like Bitcoin as the gold standard and we get a new set of bankers, but they're still bankers, right? This is why Ethereum is so important. This is why this idea of decentralized finance is important, because Bitcoin just gives you sort of a money, but that money is often custodied in this new set of banks called crypto banks. These are the Coinbases and Geminis of the world. With Ethereum, what you get is the ability to actually do the banking yourself in a self-sovereign way. It creates like banks as protocols on top of it. So that's sort of, we can get into what it means to go bankless, but that's sort of what we're talking about. Going bankless means actually replacing the banks wholesale, not creating a new set of banks, replacing the banks with these credibly neutral protocols. And this is the idea of open finance or decentralized finance, if you've heard those terms.